Hello everyone, my name is Kelly Munn and I'm with the League of Education Voters. Welcome to our free online webinar series, Lunchtime LEVinars. We started this series over 3 years ago to share information and build knowledge on important and timely issues. We're pleased to offer these LEVinars thanks to the generous support of our sponsors, the Boeing Company. Today we get to hear from Mary Fertakis again, who will conduct the second of our two-part series on the new Every Student Succeeds Act, commonly called ESSA. Mary will speak for approximately 20 minutes and will leave 10 minutes for questions. The focus today is to dig a little deeper into 4 issues that we know are important to both our League of Education Voters listeners and to the state of Washington. Those 4 issues are parent engagement, English language learners, extended learning, and homelessness. A couple of housekeeping items before we begin. You'll notice a chat function on the right side of your screen. This is a space for you to type and pose questions to us or comments. And in addition, as always, feel free to send any feedback about the quality of the webinar either through that chat function or to info@educationvoters.org. Let me introduce you to Mary Fertakis. Many of you already know her, but just in case, I'm going to give a few bulleted items around her experience. It's so broad and deep that there's no way I can possibly list it all. But just to give you a sense of her, she's a 20-year school board director in Tukwila. She's the past president of WASDA. She sits on committees both nationally and at the state level. She has her own consulting business that specializes in education and equity issues. She's a consultant for the National School Board Association. She has her master's in education policy, and she served for 2.5 years as a Peace Corps volunteer in Senegal, West Africa. And she's LEV June Activist of the Month. I'd like to welcome Mary, and she can begin her discussion around ESSA.
Awesome. Thank you, Kelly. I appreciate that nice introduction, and let's just dive in. The second slide is actually just restating what Kelly has already said, which of the 4 areas of specific issues of concern to activists in Washington State we're going to go in as a little bit of a deeper dive today. There are more, but given the constraints of time, these were the ones that we highlighted. So the next slide is going to start the parent engagement piece. Now, what I've found is that there's a lot of people who don't know that at least 1% of your Title I grant money must fund parent and family engagement activities. This is a very broad definition that the federal government gives for what constitutes a parent and family engagement activity, but this is something that these funds are to be dedicated for, and you're supposed to be involving parents in deciding how to use these funds. And of the amount that's sent directly to the state level, the SEA, or in our case OSPI, 90% of the funding for Title I is supposed to be going directly to the schools. Now, one of the things that is important for those of you who are concerned about parent engagement and authentic parent engagement is that this piece about involving parents and deciding how to use the funds, it involves having a compact with the families, and this is actually a Title I requirement. It is really an agreement that is supposed to be developed in conjunction with families and school staff, and it's to be reviewed every year to ensure that the kinds of activities under family and parent engagement taking place are those that really are speaking to our families. The second bullet point on here is that we can use Title II Part A. Title II is for professional development. You can use the funds to effectively engage parents, families, and community partners and be able to coordinate services. I wanted to highlight the word effectively because that is showing up repeatedly in ESSA in a lot of different places, but there isn't actually a definition for that. So it can be causing a little bit of confusion, but I think that needs to be part of the discussion taking place at the local level with schools and families on how they're looking at effectively engaging this part of our community. And the point is that you really want to be working together to be coordinating those services. These are questions that you can be asking and should be asking to ensure, A, that the Title I funding, at least 1%, is actually going towards family engagement activities. B, that you do actually have a parent-family engagement compact in place and that it is being reviewed on a yearly basis. So those would be very good questions for activists to be trying to get the answers to if it isn't already easily available through your local school district. The next slide also continues some parent engagement, some of the changes. And this is looking now at Title IV. And this is, Title IV is the 21st Century Schools expanded learning area of the title program, and you are supposed to be at the state level giving priority to funding programs that enroll students who may be at risk of academic failure, dropping out of school, involvement in criminal delinquent activities, those who lack strong positive role models, and what was added, and I've underlined it, is and the families of those students. So this is a significant change, and it is supposed to be getting at the issue of, we know that when the families are engaged that we're going to have better results for all of our kids. There is also a standalone program that's been created for parent engagement under Title IV called the Statewide Family Engagement Centers Program. There used to be something very similar to this. It had a different name, but this is what it's currently called under ESSA. And there has been $10 million allocated for this. This is at the federal level, going out to all 50 states. And as I mentioned on Tuesday, the fact that it's been allocated does not mean that it's been appropriated, because that budget hasn't been approved. So for those of you who are advocates on the parent engagement side, this would be a place where you would want to be talking to your senators and your or your congressional representatives, and letting them know that you would like to at least have this amount appropriated, if not more, to be covering these types of activities. The second issue is ELL, and that's on the next slide. Here are some significant changes related to this, and I put in parentheses Title I, because up until ESSA, ELL had been in Title III. And it was intentionally included in Title I with all the other programs, because there has been concern that ELL students have not been getting the attention and the focus that they should, and so this was an intentional move to ensure that that is not going to be taking place. It's eliminating separate accountability measures. It's now going to be a part of all the other accountability measures for other groups. And it is intended to make this a priority. Again, this has been in response to complaints under No Child Left Behind that our ELL students have not been getting the attention and the support that they should be getting. Another significant change is that this is going to be one of our at least 4 required indicators in the state's accountability system. And that is definitely new, and is doing a pretty clear job of emphasizing how important the Department of Ed thinks that this particular piece is. The state is going to have at least 4 indicators, 3 of which are required at the federal level, 1 that can be determined at the state level, and the state has the option to include more than that, but it has to be at least 4. But again, the fact that this is now a required indicator is a significant change. Also, the issue of tests needing to be accessible to ELLs. They have to be given more time to complete them, and tests, you have to make a good faith effort in getting tests in different languages. In our part of the state on the Puget Sound side, this is going to present some challenges, and what the definitions are going to actually be for, if you only have 3 or 4 students that are from a particular language grouping, do you need to be providing something in that particular language, or are there some other accommodations that need to be made? But the point is that you as a local district and at the state level need to be making the testing accessible to as many of our ELL students as possible. And then one that I think most of us are happy is going away is this removes the requirement to develop and use the annual measurable achievement objectives as an accountability measure. Again, you're going to be able, you have to have English proficiency as a required indicator, and so that is the replacement for the AMAO. On the next slide, also related to ELLs and testing, this is a fairly significant change. What had been in place before was that after 1 year of being in the United States, we were supposed to be testing our ELL students in English on the same test that everyone else is taking. And we've argued for years that that's just inappropriate. You're setting kids up for failure. All the research shows that people are not actually 100% or close to 100% proficient in another language until 7 years, and so it's really inappropriate to be doing the 1 year. So this is the shift, and there are two options that districts will have. The first option is to exempt your ELL students from the first year of English language arts and math assessments, and then years 2 and 3 would follow up on option 2. So with option 2, the difference is you can have your ELL students take the English language art and math assessments that your state is going to be using, but the test scores aren't going to count for school ratings. You still have to publicly report these results. And in the second year, for option 1 or 2, the state has to incorporate your ELL test scores for English language arts and math using some type of growth measure, which will be determined in the state plan. And then in the third year, they're expecting students to have proficiency levels where those scores are going to be calculated the same as non-ELL students. So for those of us with high ELL populations, we still have concerns about this, but we had been lobbying for a number of years that ELL student scores should not be counting in schools' ratings for a 3-year time period, to just be giving them that time that it would be reasonably expected that you could be seeing that they're making progress. So I think it is interesting to note that year 2 is supposed to be showing growth, which is definitely what we think the goal should be. Then the third year is the proficiency. Now, I think the jury's out on how well that's going to go, because we're not there yet, but based on past experience, you know, it'll be interesting just to see what this does, but it is an improvement over requiring schools to test their ELL students after 1 year of being in this country. The next slide also continues on with ELL, and it's talking about what the state plan must do. And so we will be having to establish standardized entrance and exit criteria. This has not been standardized across the state, and so then you have situations where students are not being assessed or placed in a timely manner, which is going to definitely impact their learning and their achievement. So this is standardizing it I believe will be a good thing for ensuring that ELL students are receiving priority attention. And it's supposed to include a requirement that all of our potential ELL students be assessed within 30 days. So again, some specific language that is in direct response to complaints across the country about ELL students not being given this type of attention. The next slide is going to talk a little bit about extended learning, which comes under Title IV. And the programs that are eligible for this funding are Title I schools that are identified for school improvement, and schools that the local education agency, the district, determines need extra support. It's interesting that there's new language for the local programs that is talking about post-secondary and workforce preparation and positive youth development. So this is a big change from when this was first adopted under as No Child Left Behind back in 2001, because we have seen a big increase in the focus on post-secondary workforce preparation across the country, and people recognizing that college and career, or post-secondary and career readiness and skills are very important, as well as recognizing the issues of social-emotional well-being under the positive youth development. The next slide continues with extended learning, and the interesting thing here that I've underlined is that the extended learning opportunities have traditionally been before or after the traditional school day, and this is now allowing these types of programs to take place during the day, and they can be funded. The caveat is that they have to supplement, not supplant, a regular school day requirement. So that means if you're normally teaching a math class, you can't then use funds from Title IV to bring in another entity to be doing that same thing. It has to be something that would be in addition to. So for example, if you are in a school that isn't offering music, perhaps you would like to use those funds to bring in some type of a music program that could take place during the day. That would be considered a supplemental piece and would be eligible for these types of funds. There is also an increased focus on aligning the school day and using student data to develop programs and evaluate the program effectiveness. So this is getting to the issue of we need to be having a better alignment of what we're trying to accomplish with the during the school day goals and district goals and class level, grade level goals with what we're offering, so that it actually is a continuation of what is happening during the day. And that does not mean that you're just doing math and English language arts. There's so many other things that can be done with the arts or cultural learnings or other types of opportunities that can absolutely be connected to what's happening during the school day. You just have to be able to show that connection. Another change is that our tribes are now eligible entities where they can directly apply for and receive funds through Title IV. On the next slide, again, extended learning. You can tell this was one that had a lot that was changed underneath it. The accountability measures for this, again, tied to college and career readiness goals and student progress on indicators of success. And again, trying to show some more accountability, show some more alignment, reflective of how we're seeing things shift in this country with more of a focus on that preparation time for college and career and social emotional. And there is a piece for parent engagement in here also. If you're supposed to be increasing our quality and accountability with our parent engagement and better alignment with school performance indicators. So again, this is recognizing the importance of having parent involvement all along the continuum of what we're offering in schools, whether it's during the traditional school day or whether it's through an extended learning or expanded learning opportunity. The next slide is talking about homelessness, and this is big. Homelessness is housed under Title IX with a number of other programs, but because of the rapid increase that we're seeing in homelessness across the country, it has now been incorporated into Title I, and specifically calling out McKinney-Vento, which if you're not familiar with it, the McKinney-Vento federal law is the one that provides the guidance for school districts on identification and supports for our homeless students. So it's now requiring that our local districts receiving funds through Title I Part A have to reserve a portion to support our homeless students. Our plans at the local level have to describe the services that will be provided to homeless children and youth. And this is a similar scenario to the ELL problem that I've already described, where there's been concern that our homeless students are not being identified and not being identified in a timely manner, not being provided with the supports that legally they're entitled to, and this is making our state and our local districts more accountable in this area. The fact that we now, the state level report card is going to have to include disaggregated information on graduation rates and academic achievement of all of our homeless children and youth in foster care is a significant change. There's another section I'll get to on foster care and why this is included, which will make the connection as to why this is being tied in with our homeless population. And then the local districts are supposed to be removing barriers preventing homeless youth from receiving credit for full or partial coursework satisfactorily completed at a prior school. And this is a big shift, and it is intended to be removing barriers that have occurred because our homeless population does move, and while they are allowed to stay in their school of origin if they so choose, sometimes that's not possible, but they are then starting all over again, and it's putting them further and further behind. So I think that this is a great way to recognize this, and it is going to require more communication between school districts as our students are moving back and forth between them depending on their housing situation. The next slide also continues with homelessness, and this is a focus on improving identification within both the state and the local district jurisdiction. So we're going to be required at the state level as a part of our state plan to include our description of how we're going to provide the support to districts for identification, enrollment, attendance, and school stability. So that will be it might not be an official accountability measure, but there is a requirement that this be included. This obviously will include some costs at the state level in order to support that. And then at the local district level, our Title I plans have to describe the services we'll be providing to support enrollment, attendance, and success. Again, making sure that this is something that stays on the radar and is a priority, also in recognition of the fact that the data is showing that this is a rapidly increasing subgroup of our population. The next slide talks specifically about foster students, and the reason why this has been included for the first time in this legislation is that a significant number of foster children are classified as homeless. And I need to get validation of this, but the percentage that I've been seeing is that up to 40% of foster children end up being classified as homeless. And sometimes this is as they're getting older and become independent youth. But there was a concern that we need to ensure that this subset of students is getting the supports that they need, because their data for graduation is absolutely abysmal in how they've been able to be successful. So these changes are intended to provide school stability, and it's also requiring that local school districts and child welfare agencies collaborate on developing things like transportation procedures to maintain that school of origin when they move, if it's in their best interest. So those were the 4 issues that we wanted to highlight for you. As I mentioned, there are others, but these 4 are some that are significant for our state. The next slide, I have also repeated the resources page from the Tuesday webinar. In case there are people who were not able to join that one, I just want to point it out to you, because the first 2 are the websites for both the Department of Ed and OSPI, the specific links for if you would like to sign up to get notifications when there are additional information pieces added related to ESSA. It does help so that you don't have to constantly be looking, and it keeps you informed about what's currently happening. And now I will stop there and leave it open for questions.
Thank you so much, Mary. We're going to leave about 10 minutes for questions, so we'll go long. For those of you who have to log off now, I just want to tell you about our next webinar, which will be either August 23rd or 24th. It's still to be determined, but we will have Representative Sharon Tomito-Santos explaining the really important opportunity/achievement gap bill that was passed last session, and the ramifications for our state and our students. If you have any additional questions, please email me at kelly@educationvoters.org. And remember that this presentation was recorded, and you can find it you will be able to find it on our website. So let's start with some questions coming in. This is first a reminder that if you write in your chat on the right-hand side of the screen, we will receive those questions. We have a couple of questions that have already come in. One is, when is the beginning date of ESSA requirements?
The ESSA implementation is supposed to be in place for the 2017-18 school year. And we are concerned about that. That is written in the law. We're concerned about the timeline of Department of Ed and the pace of regulations coming out, which are taking place simultaneously with the work going on in our state with the work plans and the work groups and the state consolidated plan. And we're concerned about the timeline of when the Department of Ed would actually be approving our plan, and where that aligns with school district budgets and the requirement that those be done by July 31st, which means you have to have the planning done. And the other piece of this that's a concern is the budget for the title programs, and ESSA has not been appropriated yet. And with this being an election year, it's always a big question mark on how quickly Congress is going to move on that. But that is what the law says, is beginning of 2017-18 school year.
Thank you. So here's another question from a listener. Mary, you have worked hard to educate our congressional representatives about No Child Left Behind. Do you see anything missing from ESSA that should have been included?
Well, as I made brief reference to, we really, those of us who have been in high ELL population districts have been really concerned about the requirements of how quickly our kids' scores are going to be counted. And it's not because we don't believe they can do it, it's just dealing with the physiological realities of how long it takes to learn another language, and the concern that we don't want our kids to be labeled as failing or schools to be labeled as failing if they have high ELL populations, because it just takes time to get there. So like I said, I was disappointed when I saw the fact that we really only potentially can have kids scores not count for the first year, but it is encouraging that at least there was a recognition of the complaints that we registered for all of the years of No Child Left Behind on this, that it was at least doing a progression of growth to proficiency. I think one of the things that I'm not sure about whether it's missing or not, but what I'm concerned about is that because No Child Left Behind had such a huge focus on compliance and it was very heavy-handed, that's the culture that's been established, and that's the mode that people are in. And it's part of the reason why we want people to have more information about ESSA, because it's a great opportunity to influence our state plan. We have a lot more say in what's happening time around than we did last time around, and so we have an opportunity to get it right. And so at this point, I'm going to have to wait until I see the recommendations from, in particular, the accountability work group and a couple of others before I'll know what other concerns I'll have. But I will be watching that because, again, we need to be looking at the aspirational opportunity piece, not just be in a compliance.
So it sounded like it's 3 years before it's expected to have English proficiency. Is that
Yes.
what the data supports, or is that what ESSA has decided?
That's what ESSA has. That is not what data supports. Data supports that someone is proficient in another language after 7 years. And depending on the age of the child we're talking about, the older you are, this is indisputable, the older you are, unless you are one of the rare people who is gifted with languages, the longer it takes you to learn a language. And for districts who have students coming in as immigrants, refugees, who may be coming in at middle or high school, I don't think it's reasonable to expect that they're going to be at a high level of proficiency to be doing well on some of the tests, especially the way we do the tests. When you're talking about math, if you were just using numbers, that's one thing, but we use a lot of story problems. And so students are working through the English part before they're getting to even the math part. And so it's not a surprise we see the discrepancy in their scores. So have I answered your question?
Yes, you have. So on the tests in different languages, can you clarify, does that mean the state tests are supposed to be translated into the 150 plus languages that are in our state? And if so, will it be done at the state level so all school districts can use those tests?
This is the interesting thing. That is not specifically stated in the bill. The language I used in my slide, it says more time, tests in different languages. That's what it says. So that is a state determination, and states could decide. For some states where it may be more of a bilingual situation, it's not going to be that big a deal, and they will be able to get a large percentage of their students able to take the test in their language of origin. in a situation like Washington, where we do have as many languages as you referenced, that's going to be a big problem. And there are some languages, I'll just pick Somali as an example, that's only been a written language for about 35 years. So to be offering it as in a written format may not be the best way to do it either. It may need to be orally delivered. And that may be one of the accommodations the state would come up with, is that you can get that the test taken orally, but there are huge expenses involved in that, and as I said, there's not budget dollars that have been allocated for this. It would be a state expense, since this would be a state determination, so I'm not sure what our state is going to do.
Thank you. Are there going to be, is ESSA going to help the state move away from heavy testing to more realistic progress tracking?
That would be a point that I would be raising with the accountability work group, and either asking that question or making a recommendation. There are some requirements for testing, but the states are going to have more leeway over that. One of the phenomenons we're seeing right now is a growing number of states are opting to use the SAT or the ACT as their high school graduation one, rather than trying to find something that they're having to spend the money developing. So again, this is going to be the testing piece, the accountability piece. Those are all issues that work group is grappling with right now, and if people have suggestions or input they want to be giving related to it, I would be contacting someone you know on that work group, or to the OSPI lead who is listed on the OSPI website.
I'm going to remind people, if they have a question, to put it into the chat. We probably have room for 1 or 2 more questions. Right now we have a question on, is foster youth and homeless youth separate data categories now?
At the state level, or?
Because of ESSA, is that what it's going to have occur, separate them out, or are they going to be grouped together?
There is specific language for students who are under the McKinney-Vento legislation, which is the homeless legislation, and then there has been additional language specific to foster students that have been added under ESSA. And again, that language is housed under Title IX, and again, this is a first, and it's based on the data that we're seeing with the increase in both populations in this country. But there are specific things that McKinney-Vento already requires that school districts do, and I should note that this is a basically majorly underfunded mandate. For example, transportation is a huge cost to school districts right now for McKinney-Vento, and now foster students will be incorporated into that. So there's separate language specific to both subgroups, but the intent of it is to improve the outcomes for both groups.
Thank you. I think we have one last question coming in. Does ESSA directly address the achievement or opportunity gap for non-ELL or foster homeless students?
Yes. The whole point of when this was originally developed back in the 60s was to be focusing on students who were disadvantaged. And at that time, we didn't have as large of an ELL population, so the focus was on students in poverty. So the student in poverty piece has not gone away at all. In fact, a lot of the Title I funding formulas are based on your free and reduced lunch rate or your poverty rate. They actually separate it. With states use free and reduced lunch, and the federal government uses a different way of counting this, but it's basically a poverty factor. So that essential piece of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act has not gone away, and it still is foundational.
Thank you, Mary. I think we have one last question, and then this will really be the last one. I can see it. I want to remind everyone that Mary is at this point an expert in this arena for the state of Washington. That's why we have her presenting today. She does have a consulting business, and if you need some help in your organizations, she's out there ready to be hired and be helpful to all of us trying to get our head around these issues. We have recorded this webinar, and it will be up on our website. And if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to email me at kelly@educationvoters.org. Here's our last question. Considering how underfunded this is, why is so much of the legislation geared towards immigrants and non-English speaking students?
Okay. I wouldn't say that a lot of it is geared toward non-English speaking or immigrant students. If looking at the whole 449-page bill, there's a lot dealing with, like I said, homeless, foster students, students in poverty. What we're doing in this webinar is just pulling out a few topics, so you're getting a lot more in-depth information about ELL in this one, so it may seem like it's disproportionate, but that's really not the case. And if people want to do more and looking at other pieces, some of the other issues we looked at when we did a regional workshop on this also included early learning, because there's a lot related to that. There's things related to the college and career preparation that are significant changes, and some others. So it probably feels disproportionate simply because this is one of the issues that we chose to highlight today because it's significant for our state.
And I'll chime in. I was part of that decision making, and it's because they've put so much more focus on it. And for our state, that could be helpful to us. So those are the reasons. We know there's a lot of interest in these arenas, so we chose to put those in. Thank you so much, Mary. This was really helpful. Our next webinar will be with Representative Sharon Tomiko Santos explaining the Opportunity Gap Bill. It will be either August 23rd or 24th, same time as today. We thank you all for participating and asking us questions. And again, feel free to share comments with me at Kelly@EducationVoters. And I hope to hear you or have you listening at future webinars. Have a good day.